Hello everyone. So with MRAD, we already have a way to organize the major parts of the paper, but we still need to tackle those secondary sources. How can we present our secondary source information? How do we organize or Marie Kondo this stuff? Well, when we talk about organization, we're really talking about how to present our ideas logically. Why can't you just word vomit or do stream of consciousness? Well, our brains want organization. They actually really like it. We are primed to process material in an organized way, such as chunks or units. Think of how we memorize phone numbers or the way we present a recipe. We naturally separate things. Additionally, when we chunk things, we categorize them. We put like with like and give it a label. Good writing, therefore, appeals to this need for chunks and categories. If you present your information in such a way, the reader has an easier time understanding, and then they are more likely to believe or follow your logic. So with your secondary sources, how can you chunk them and categorize them? Well, there are several patterns you can use for organization. Here are the 8 we're going to talk about today, but you'll likely use a topical organization, cause-effect, or pros and cons for your work. As we go through the presentation, just think about your sources and what would work best. So the first one was sequential. This is when you present your information in a series of steps or a process. For example, if you're writing about waste in the fashion industry, you start with the first step of the fashion process. This would be harvesting materials. Then you'd move through each of the steps and identify waste at each level. Another example would be if you're writing about issues with Title IX protocol. You'd follow a process that the victim must take, identifying issues at each step. This pattern is best for research questions that fall under the controversy of evaluation, procedure policy, or cause and consequence. When you use it, your reader gets to follow along and really see the weight of the issue at every step. Then we have spatial. For this one, think about maps, because the organization is specific to certain countries, areas, or departments. For example, if you're writing about marijuana legalization, you could go by the countries and present each country with their different levels of legalization and the different consequences of that. If you want to do Title IX again, you could focus on each area involved, such as the police, the hospital, the administration, the classroom, etc. This pattern is best for questions that fall under the controversy of evaluation, procedure policy, or cause and consequence, because your reader gets to see the issue from all sides or different perspectives. Next is my personal favorite and go-to, topical. It's just when you arrange by related topics that don't necessarily have a specific commonality or order to them. For example, if you're doing marijuana, you could focus on the economy, the individual, and the medical field as different areas or aspects. With topical, note that the order doesn't matter. You could do individual before you do economy. You could do medicine first. The order isn't important, just the grouping. Other examples would be like if you're studying hybrid learning, you could do engagement, grades, and theory. If you were doing music, you could do by different genre, just different categories. Topical organization is good for all controversy categories because it can really fit with anything that has a topic. Your reader knows how to group things with this pattern, and it firmly establishes an idea before it moves on to the next one. Next up, we have all the binary patterns. These are ones I'm sure you get right away, like compare and contrast is when you compare the things, then contrast the things. Same with cause effect, you explain the causes and the effects. Pretty straightforward. If you're, some examples with this would be like social media. You first present the pros, then the cons of social media. If you're doing climate change, it'd be like the industries and what they do, and then the effects on the pollution or resources or something. Some things with this organizational pattern to think about are, can you flip them? So could you present the solution before the problem? Can you present cons before pros? Technically, yes, you could. There's nothing that says you have to do effect or cause before effect. What you need to evaluate is if that choice of flipping them is effective. Kind of consider the weight of that choice. For example, The reader will most likely remember the second binary, so the second thing you tackle, because it's what they end on. It has the stronger weight. So if you flip them, do you want your reader to end on that second thing? Do you want your reader to end on effects and remember the effects, or do you want them to remember the causes? So you can consider that. You should also think about, can you group all the problems together and all the cons together? Or should you go to a smaller scale, do a problem and a con, addressing them one at a time? You can do either of them, but you need to consider paragraph length. Because if you have a really long paragraph, like you're putting all the cons together, they can get buried and then they lose the quality or impact. Another approach you can do, rather than just flipping and doing, maybe addressing things one at a time, is you can integrate another type of organizational pattern. So you could do pros and cons with sequential patterns, or you could do problem and solution with spatial. That way you can have like subheadings and subheadings, which might just be a better way to organize things. Binary organization is good for controversies of evaluation and of cause and consequence, because both really focus on the two sides and establishing a clear relationship between the two. Last up, we have chronological, which is organizing by time or events that have a very specific order. So this could be writing again about climate change, where you go decade by decade and then project into the future. Or it could be something based on generations, like you want to focus on boomers, then millennials, and then Gen Z. Note that this doesn't mean history. You're not going to be like, it started like this, and then go through every major event. You're focusing more on the events that have significance, and then you're also analyzing the importance of those events, rather than just presenting what happened. This is a really good pattern for cause and consequence, because like sequential, your reader gets to follow along and see the weight of the impact at every moment. So what do we do with all these patterns? Well, you probably won't need this information until next week when you write the literature review, but it is still technically helpful when you're writing your annotated bibs synthesis section, because you'll need to look at your sources and ask, how do these connect? How can they be grouped together? Can you group two sources by their time, space, topic, process, or some sort of binary? And then, how else do they connect? Do they agree, disagree, complicate? Keep these questions in mind as you wrap up Project 3 and start Project 4.